Welcome to American Catechism, episode number 39 by Stab the Dragon Productions for movie review number 9. Today is Monday, December 15th, 2025, and it is currently about 44 degrees, but it was 29 degrees this morning. We are here to review this movie, Miracle on 34th Street, 1947 edition. American Catechism is all about exploring and discussing our history as Americans and as members of Western civilization. But we look not just at history, but politics, current events, theology, whiskey, the arts. And so we do movie reviews, usually of old classic movies or movies that present interesting ideas, movies that only I would like, maybe. Along the way, I enjoy and discuss some whiskeys that may go either with the movie itself or one of the actors or simply the times in which the movie was made. So today's whiskey is Old Overholt Rye, a whiskey that was popular in the 1940s when this movie was made. So, to the movie. Just the facts. Miracles on 34th Street was directed by George Seaton, produced by William Perlberg. Screenplay was also by George Seaton. The story by Valentine Davies. Music by Cyril Mockridge. Starring Maureen O'Hara, John Payne, Edmund Gwynn, and Natalie Wood. This movie is black and white and runs for 96 minutes. The DVD can be had for under $9 or available for free on YouTube with commercials, and it's actually broadcast on TV every season, every Christmas season. Budget was $248,000 for this movie, but the box office take was $2.7 million, so it was a financial success, and it won 3 Oscars and was nominated for Best Picture, but didn't win that one. Plot summary. This is a Christmas favorite still today after almost 80 years. It's the Christmas story of Kris Kringle, an old man who replaces a drunk imposter Santa Claus in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and then he is hired to be the Macy's Santa Claus for that season. But there are nefarious forces lining up against him because he's convinced that he's the real Santa Claus, and the store psychologist doesn't like that idea. And so he eventually goes for a competency hearing, and the district attorney and Doris Walker, who hired him, has also fired him. They don't believe in Santa Claus, and so they want to have him committed to a mental institution. But Doris's young daughter, Susan, who's been raised to not believe in Santa Claus or faith, but only in science and facts, eventually becomes kind of convinced that he may be the real Santa Claus. Doris and Susan's neighbor is Fred Gailey. He's the attorney who befriends them and also defends Kris Kringle, defending Santa Claus in court at a competency hearing. And that well-publicized show trial gets Gailey fired from his day job. The story shows a little girl and a woman coming to faith in the budding romance between Gailey and Doris Walker. I gave this movie a score of 91, letter grade of an A+. My recommendation: this is an exceptionally well-done seasonal movie that is still popular after 78 years, making it a durable classic. It deserves the Library of Congress, placing it in the National Film Registry. The movie has its feel-good, warm and fuzzy holiday side, but the deeper issues here that are put forward for the viewer to think about are important. So I would say grab a mug of hot chocolate, some hot apple cider, or maybe a rye whiskey, and enjoy. Details. Historical accuracy. Now, this movie does not depict a historical event, but it does present some ideas that were percolating through America at the time, and it accurately portrays the times in which the movie was made. The movie does show some film from the 1946 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and it portrays the struggles in America between faith and tradition on one side and science and business on the other, and it forms a dilemma, and that's the theme for the movie. This ideological struggle has in fact been going on in America for well over 100 years, but especially since the Scopes monkey trial of 1925. These struggles, I guess, are a permanent fixture in our society. They're not going to go away, and they're deeply rooted in who we are as Americans. So the portrayal in this movie, combined with the strong sentimental value of Christmas, is what makes it a classic, and it's just going to continue to be a favorite. So 18 out of 20 for historical accuracy. Production background. This movie was partly filmed at the Macy's Parade on Thanksgiving Day in 1946, live, when it was very cold and windy. And what this means is they would only get one shot at each scene. You can't stop the parade and redo it, right? So there's no retakes. Maureen O'Hara had just recently moved back home to Ireland, and so she came back to the States when she read the script and realized, she wanted the role after all. The title to this movie was constantly changing, going through about 5 different names. Edwin Gwynn, who took the role of Kris Kringle, only after his cousin, Cecil Kellaway, turned it down and then recommended him. Edmund Gwynn and Natalie Wood were filmed in a real Macy's cafeteria line for the movie. Studio head Daryl Zanuck did not like the film, and so he had it released in June instead of the November-December timeframe. There was one scene in there where there was an inclusion of a little Dutch orphan girl from World War II. I thought that was a classy touch. Well played. So for production, 5 out of 5 points. Set, scenery, and wardrobe. Again, they used the real Macy's. They used the real parade. So that was genius. The wardrobes and sets all reflected the post-war era accurately. And one of the reasons I love these older movies is the style of dress by people back then. I view clothing as an art form. It's not just utilitarian, although it is that. But it's an art form that reflects a people's values and creativity and character. Looking around today and comparing how we dress in public with back then kind of makes me sad. So for set, scenery, and wardrobe, 8 out of 10 points. Music. Music is by Cyril Mockridge. He lived 1896 to 1979. He was a British film composer who trained at the Royal Academy of Music in London. The music definitely reflected the seasons and the times, with many favorite Christmas songs and parade songs. So 13 out of 15 for music. The story and plot. The movie begins with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and Kris Kringle discovers that the parade Santa Claus is drunk on duty. So Kris convinces Doris Walker, the manager, to use him as Santa instead of the drunk imposter. Well, Kris impresses Doris, and then he gets hired on as the store Santa Claus, right? But he soon runs afoul of store management because he's recommending toys from other stores, and the psychologist finds out that he thinks he's the actual real Santa Claus. And Doris, as the hiring manager, has to fire him, right? And then they're going to recommend him for a competency hearing to see if he's mentally fit to be in society. Meanwhile, on the home front, though, Doris's neighbor is an attorney, Fred Gailey, and he begins wooing Doris and her daughter Susan, and also befriends Kris, and then he defends Kris. He's the lawyer. And Kris is going to be sent to the doctors and to court by the store psychologist and all this. And so there's a struggle here between faith and science, tradition and business. And in the process, Susan, the 7-year-old girl, and Kris, they are the two prizes, right? Gailey gets fired from his law firm over defending Kris Kringle, but masterfully wins the competency case for Kris, and along the way converts Doris and Susan in the end. So yeah, there's a feel-good, happy ending, happily ever after, I guess you could say. There's the romance there is coming to fruition. So it's a great conclusion for all. So the story and the plot absolutely works. It holds together quite well. 19 out of 20 points. Let's talk about acting and some particular scenes here. The acting in this movie is superb all the way through. Gwen won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor as Kris Kringle, and little Natalie Wood, she also won an Oscar. So, these Oscars are well deserved. Maureen O'Hara, she's a favorite of ours. I mean, she was in a couple of John Wayne movies. Quiet Man comes to mind, and so she was in. Actually, we've seen her in a couple of other movies. So yeah, Maureen O'Hara is a favorite. She plays this professional businesswoman, divorcee, raising her daughter alone. And she's kind of the liberal leftist unbeliever sort, right? To watch her conversion by Kris Kringle and Fred Gailey, and then even her boss, Mr. Macy, kind of sees the light here, right? This whole conversion story was a highlight of the film. But it was little Natalie Wood as Susan who really shines as the star. Because to an extent, Christmas is all about the kids, right? And the conversion of Susan by Chris and Fred, that seems to be the key theme of the movie throughout the action. And perhaps the best scene in the movie, though, was when Chris speaks Dutch to a little Dutch war orphan that was in the Santa Claus line. Now, she just played a bit part, but oh so crucial for the big scheme of things. And then there's the Macy psychologist, Mr. Sawyer. He is one of the two perfect foils in the movie who promotes the unbelieving side, right? Along with the DA, Thomas Mara, who has the odious task of putting Kris Kringle away into the mental institution. DA Mara's own son in another bit part that packs a hefty punch. He tells the court, he's called to the witness stand, and he tells the court that his dad told him that Santa Claus is real. And then he identifies Kris Kringle as Santa Claus. And he says, my dad doesn't lie. So, well played, Fred Gailey. Yeah, definitely. That courtroom scene was fantastic. Another highlight was the conversation between Chris and young Alfred, the janitor, played by Alvin Greenman. And finding Alvin Greenman name in the credits is almost impossible. I mean, I had to do a lot more searching to find who his name was. So he's got this side gig as a Santa Claus, but he works at Macy's as a janitor. And the short dialogue in the hallway there between Kris Kringle and Alfred is really a key part of the film, because Alfred mentions how fed up he is with the commercialism and Christmas and all those other isms while working at Macy's, right? So even in 1947, commercialism was a key concern and a social topic, and it still is, and it will always be. Then there was the scene in the courtroom in the judge's chambers between Judge Harper, played by Gene Lockhart, and political handler Charlie Halloran, who was played by William Frawley, or Fred Mertz on The Lucy Show. And here we get a little glimpse of how the political system works, how corrupt it is, even in the courts. So well done to the director and the writers there, definitely, because they're weighing in the balance. Okay, look, this guy is obviously crazy as far as we know, but do you really want to suffer the political consequences of sending Kris Kringle to a mental institution? Can you afford to do that, really? And so that whole setup was just beautiful. Excellent jab at the system. So the movie, I think, rightfully belongs in the collection of the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. The acting was superb, up and down the whole lineup. 15 of 15. Special effects. Well, there's no real special effects in this movie. But there were a couple of miracles. I mean, the title, Miracle on 34th Street. The movie is about this miracle, which there at Macy's, it's happening in a commercial environment. But the subtle miracle is the conversion of Doris and Susan. The more noticeable miracle is the conversion of Macy's department store to being much more customer friendly, right? Kris Kringle's recommending toys at other stores that Macy doesn't have with better prices or whatever. And that goes up and down the food chain there. And next thing you know is all the store managers come together and say, hey, this is a great customer friendly policy. And so the whole tone is changed in that store by Kris Kringle. So that's a miracle. The courtroom drama, that was a miracle, led by Fred Gailey. And so that was just amazing to watch. But the final miracle, of course, is the house for Susan, that cane left in the corner. So I love older movies that are not reliant on special effects, but in this case, some special miracles. So the movie, doesn't have to rely on high-tech special effects. Dialogue, acting, the plot, that's what makes a movie. 8 out of 10 points. Bonus points. 5 out of 5, because we watch this movie every Christmas season. The story, the acting, the messages there, all of it is just perfect. So 5 out of 5 points for bonus. And that gives me the total score of 91. Letter grade for enjoyability and importance, A+. Analysis and recommendation. This is a very well done Christmas season movie that is still popular after 78 years. And so it is a durable classic. It deserves that Library of Congress placement in the National Film Registry. The important ideas that are put forward in this movie go well beyond the Santa Claus motif. This is faith versus science and that tension. And I don't say faith versus science. I believe in science, but I also believe in faith. They work together. Tradition versus business. Well, good business, it makes perfect sense. And tradition makes good sense as well. So they work together. Family values versus corporate values. Freedom of thought and freedom of doing good versus just following the rules of society blindly because it imposes on you, robbing you of your individuality. So the movie has some Americanisms there that just won't quit. It's all over the place. Yeah, it's got the feel-good, warm and fuzzy holiday thing, but the deeper issues put forward, if the viewer's willing to think about, there are a lot of deep issues here. So it has many different levels that are portrayed in each of the settings. The business setting, the courts, the family life, the mental health institution. So if you want just a feel-good, warm holiday tale, this is for you. But if you want a movie to reflect on some of the eternal issues that our society is still facing and will continue to face, you can do it here. Now, nowhere in this movie is the true Christmas message from the Bible presented. This is not a gospel-oriented movie. However, even though it's not all about the Christ of Christmas, it is about the cultural Christmas that our nation celebrates, and that creates an opening to present the Christ of Christmas. Nonetheless, there are some tantalizing truths discussed here. So if you're going to have a movie discussion group, maybe a youth group, maybe just a group of friends gathering at Christmas time to watch a Christmas movie, or family members, there's plenty of gospel openings here that you can use. So this is the type of cultural movie that lends itself to discussing the gospel. So I would say grab a mug of hot chocolate, hot apple cider, or maybe even a rye whiskey and enjoy. Now the whiskey, Old Overholt, straight rye, bottle and bond. Just the facts. This brand is owned by Jim Beam, which in turn is owned by the Japanese company Suntory. But the name goes all the way back to 1810 in western Pennsylvania, and a German immigrant Mennonite farmer whose son Abraham, pictured there on the bottle, took over the family still and turned it into a business. So this brand has been in continuous production for 215 years. Not many businesses in America can say that, I'll tell you. So this whiskey is at least 4 years old, and it weighs in at 100 proof because it's a bottled in bond. It's a government rating. The score that I gave this whiskey is an 87, and the letter grade, solid A. My recommendation. This is a very good, solid rye whiskey at a great proof and a great price. I've always had this rye whiskey in my home for the past 10 years at least. So I've gone through probably 5 bottles of this in a variety of proofs. Now, it's called a Kentucky rye. Originally, it was a Monongahela rye, Pennsylvania. But the mash bill is not released, so I don't know their percentages. This does not taste like other Kentucky ryes that have more of a bourbon-esque feel about them. 51% rye, the rest is corn and a little bit of barley. So this is not like Elijah Craig. It's not like Woodford, Jim Beam, Old Forester. The price, quality, and value here is great, and it's got I think a higher rye mash bill. So I absolutely highly recommend it. All right, this is American Catechism. Merry Christmas. And we'll be doing some more history videos shortly and maybe look at some Canadian whiskeys out here.